everybody. Angie Callan here, and we are live on LinkedIn. This is No More Mondays, where we believe you can have a thriving career and an amazing life on your terms. So to that end, we bring guests onto the show who have stories that prove it and advice to help you do the same. For all of you out there listening in podcast land, I want to remind you that we now go live every Monday morning to help you kick off your week, 10:15 Mountain, noon 15 Eastern on LinkedIn. So if you want to be on the live conversation fresh off the presses, tune in with us or grab it wherever you like to get your podcast throughout the week when it helps you with the lift you need. Today, I've got a special treat for you all as we welcome Mike Gardon to the show. Mike and I share a couple really cool perspectives on how and what it means to break the corporate mold and define life and career on your terms. It just so happens we both like to talk about having no more Mondays and ditching the Sunday scaries. So this was just a match made in heaven from the beginning. I'm excited for you to learn from him today. I'm excited he was willing to join me here on LinkedIn Live. Mike, welcome to No More Mondays.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is going to be a lot of fun. Great topics.
We had great pre-show chatter. We've had some fun banter back and forth, trying to promote and get you all in on the live. Notwithstanding all of the C's in my certification. But there you go. It's what happens when you're a certified career coach, I suppose. So let's just dive right in, Mike. I want you to talk to everybody about just this idea of breaking corporate dependence. What does it mean? What does it mean to build a self-directed career or to break that corporate mold?
Yeah. So I'll start at the beginning, which is I have an obsession with this word break. And I think it's really an interesting word just because what I've discovered in my life is that there's so many times in our lives where we have a map of reality or a way of looking at the world, and something happens in our life that makes us completely change direction or open up a new door or whatever. And I call that a break moment. So I've had a number of these in my life that has completely changed my perspective on things. And so I started with that word break. And one of the things, as I continued to progress, one of the things I really see a lot is this idea that we come out and we get a job and that sets the tone for our career. Like that we just keep moving forward and forward. And that to me is just a very default way to live our lives, right? A ton of things happen that just define for us the path that we are on. And if you're like 40-ish like me, you do. I so understand the like midlife crisis moment. Now being this age, and so one of the things that I want to just really bring attention to is this idea that we have a default path, and as we move along that path, we actually become dependent on that path, not only for money and our livelihood, but we also become dependent on that path for our identities, our self-worth, how we compare, to the rest of society. All of these things are kind of embedded in this default pathway. And so I think that is one of the perspectives we need to really break as a society. And the opposite of being dependent is being self-directed. And so one of the things that I and we really help people do is become much more intentional about our careers. Look, I build businesses and I've done that stuff, but I don't think people have to do that in order to get some freedom in their lives or a great feeling and be able to live really big whole lives. But you do have to start being intentional, and you have to start really crafting your world around you and around your interests and your likes and your energizers, because no one's actually going to do that for you. So if we continue to just take the default path without critically thinking, we're going to stay stuck. So that's the idea.
And there's so many little bits there. It's really validating to talk to somebody who has perspectives like this, because I also think when you're going through it and you're making these realizations, you feel like the odd man out because we are bucking the trends, right? So, I kind of started to realize the limitations of the corporate world and that it might not be the right fit for me years ago when I was a young engineer. And it just seemed like everybody was mediocre is the word I've always kind of attached to it. And then I moved from the East Coast where the rat race is kind of prime to Colorado and started realizing that there was so much more to life. And for me, the corporate world wasn't going to support or align with it. And that's when a lot of these little pieces you're talking about have, in hindsight now, I've realized the fact that we have agency in our career. And this is a really important thing to know, whether you are employed or whether you are currently an entrepreneur or aspiring to one. Mike and I were talking before we came on live that both of us agree everyone in the world shouldn't be an entrepreneur and shouldn't start a business, but that doesn't mean you don't have agency and control over crafting an intentional path, because I think the challenge that you face, or one of the reasons we should care about this whole topic, is you will at some point realize you're stuck. And all of it will come crashing down, and you may not have as many options as you would if you kind of exercised choice earlier in career. So it can be really powerful if you're able to be aware of kind of what you want out of life, what career supports that, and then exercise that kind of control and break those traditions, break those beliefs that we have been told for our whole lives, and start to evaluate how we want to answer those questions.
Yeah, I would add to that a little bit, like just some really interesting things that I see from my own experience, but also people that I coach and work with is, a lot of people think taking some of this agency is selfish, right? They think I'm a provider for my family, my kids, I need to sacrifice for them. And some of that is noble and good, but what really happens is, like, if you're miserable, that's rubbing off on your family.
Yes.
And when you make a break or make a transition and really start to embrace life and the ability to do all of this, be creative, provide value, and live like a full life without all of this negativity coming from work or bringing it home with you, you're a better person, and that helps your entire family and people that you care for. So it's not a selfish thing. It's a, hey, we're here once, like we should enjoy life. Again, I think part of what makes life great and grand is work, is providing value into society. So I am not somebody that's like, oh yeah, we should just go work at like a tiki bar, on some island. And like, I'm not that at all. I'm like, how can we bring our best talents forward?
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, I don't think it's generally in the setting where that was built, in the Industrial Revolution, of everybody has a lane and division of labor and all of those things. It doesn't foster that creativity that I think is inside all of us. And so those are the types of things that I kind of think about in terms of breaking. Like, how am I breaking my vision of me sacrificing and being a provider? How am I breaking the vision of what it is to be a good worker and be creative? And how do those things, how much do I want some of those things in my life? And how do I then go about, constructing what I need?
And to go back to the family piece, I'm going to also add, what type of example are you setting
Right.
up for your kids as well? Not only being able to be present with full energy because you're not giving all of that to something that's sucking it, but also setting a good example for them and the values that they're going to carry forward. Because you opened the door, and I'm so glad you did, is that we live in a different climate, a different era, right? It's not the Industrial Revolution. It's not even the 50s where you went to a job and stayed in that job for 30 years with your pension. Good Lord, the pension would still be nice. But I would say times have changed, and the climate is kind of more ripe than ever to really take control of your career, break those traditions, and define what you want out of it. And I'm going to bring the very important word purpose into this, because that's exactly what you were just talking about, Mike, is that when we can begin to work with purpose, like you said, not necessarily just saying, hey, I'm going to go have a 4-hour work week. I feel like you and I could probably get on a soapbox about that.
Yeah.
But really beginning to kind of provide value in a purposeful way, that's when a lot of this comes, kind of all starts to come together, and work has meaning. And now you can break the cycle because you have that intention aligned with purpose. So talk to me a little bit more about kind of what that means, what that looks like to begin transforming those circumstances, to begin, thinking about working, smarter or with purpose. What might it look like? What might it look like if you should start thinking about that? Talk to me more about that.
Yeah, I do think it's difficult because it's a very deep and personal question. So it takes time. I don't think you just figure that out in like a 5-minute exercise. It's taken me iterations upon iterations, and I think I'm there now, but it's taken a while. So what I like to do is start with the inverse. Like what is living with purpose or creating with purpose? What is it not? And like, let's start to eliminate things and chip away at what to leave like what it is. I love the word purpose over passion.
Yep.
And to me, to me, purpose comes from thinking about that question of what value do I want to deliver in the world, or what problems do I want to work on and do I care about most? I think about it from those bigger questions and then try to like chip down. So for example, I'll just give my own example. We talked about family. I have 3 boys right here. And I think the most important thing that I can do literally on this earth is to equip them with the ability to be super adaptable, super resilient to change, because our world is moving faster and faster and faster. And for me to know that they are going to be okay and survive in the world and thrive, those are the most important things. So what I've literally constructed in my life today is a field where I am learning all about adaptability, resilience, and change through one of the biggest, hairiest change problems there possibly is, which is people being stuck in their careers. And how do they look at change? How are they averse to it? How do you figure out a high odds path out of that situation? And then I'm literally able to, pass on these life lessons to my kids. So when you talk about purpose, it's not like, oh, my purpose is to be a coach. My purpose is like, what is the highest value I can provide? What is the thing that I care about the most? What is the biggest problem then that I could possibly work on? The most interesting thing that I could possibly work on? And it's an intersection of these things, and that can be your purpose. And again, coupled with like, I don't want to go sit on a beach and retire. Having more money right now through passive income or whatever, like that isn't purpose at all. It's like, what can I actively be working on? How can I be creative? How can I deliver value to people that need it now? And hopefully if I engineer this right, I can actually continue to work into my 80s on something that I care about, because I've designed that in a way where I'm not just squirreling it all away, hoping to retire one day. It's like, oh, I'm going to keep myself active, and I'm going to keep learning, and I'm going to keep helping people, well into that period of time, because that's what we're on this earth to do.
I love that you talked about purpose versus passion, because we've all heard that cliche, and there's a lot of cliches that I believe are cliches and are true for a reason. But that find your passion and like you'll never work a day, I think is a dangerous statement, because a lot of us have passions that ain't ever going to make us any money.
Right.
And also, I don't know that because you're passionate about it, it may not really help you serve, right? It's passions to me are things that fulfill hobbies, learning. They fulfill a different area of our life than purposeful work and meaningful work really does. And I love this idea of like you reverse engineer it. And it's funny that you brought that up, because one of the things a lot of times I'll talk to clients about when they're like, oh, I'm stuck, or something doesn't feel right, or I want to do something different, but I don't know what it is. I'll ask them the very simple question of what's missing. And it's very similar to like starting with almost where the lack is, because that typically identifies something that you should be activating that isn't really live. And we're going to live longer than anybody else. And that's every generation to come is probably going to be able to say the same thing. So the idea of, oh, I'm going to retire at 62 and I'm just going to work like a dog in order to, have fun for 15 years when I'm now at the 2/3 through my age, I think is also kind of like lame.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
you said, how can I find, I don't like the word balance, but for lack of a better term, I'll say it. How can I find purposeful work that helps me balance my energy towards all the things that I want to do and enjoy now? And that's exactly what we're talking about,
Yeah.
which I think means we can get into some actionable advice. What do you think?
Okay.
Cool.
Sure. Yeah.
Because clearly you and I could just beat this dead horse all day long. Like, go, because the purpose and values alignment comes up on No More Mondays all the time. It is in almost every single conversation that we have, whether it's somebody who's created a business and helps people do that, or whether it's people who are in a career. The idea of finding a purpose, and really, if it's your purpose, like you said, Mike, which is always evolving in our worlds. I think I'm
Yep.
I'm like you, right? Like, it kind of you think you know what it is, and then it funnels, and then it
Mhm.
funnels, and then it funnels, and you're like, oh, I think I'm at it. In a couple of years, you'll be like, oh, I think it's just this little bit. But it's a very, very, very common theme here. And I want to know what actions people can take, right? So, kind of big picture, it's this idea of taking stock, right? Starting to look at maybe what's missing, maybe what you wish you could have or want to prioritize, and working backwards from there. But let's get even more granular. And what are some small actions or pieces of advice you have for everybody out there on how to start exploring this break of dependence and this definition of career?
Yeah. So the first thing I think people gloss over maybe is you have to create space for yourself to do this actual work. Everyone's busy. Everyone's running around like a chicken with their head cut off in their job, in their personal lives. If you have kids, especially, all of this stuff. You have to create concerted time, energy, and just mental capacity to work some of this stuff out. So, um, we coach clients a lot on just how to sort of like stiff arm your job. Like, how do you start to push back on certain things? How do you start to find pockets of time that you can carve back out for yourself? And so we aim to really help people regain 25 to 40, even up to 50% of their time in certain circumstances, um, to do that. Right. So if you think like there's no way on earth I could ever do that, it's just about framing certain things, understanding how to say no, understanding, politely, and obviously all of that stuff. But if you think you can't do it at all, I created space for myself with 3 kids under 5 when I really got out of corporate work, and I was just had a really frank conversation with my wife and partner, in life. Like, I'm not happy. I haven't figured this stuff out. I need some time, every Friday or every Saturday or Sunday, like 2 hours. I'm going to go to a coffee shop super early, and I'm just going to work on this stuff and figuring out myself. Right. So that's number one, I think. Um, do everything you can to just get some space. I don't know if you have any follow-ups on that, or if you want me to.
I'm gonna jump in and
Yeah.
ask a follow-up, because I agree that it's a priority, right? You have to
Yeah.
make it a priority because no one else is going to, and that comes into this idea of being intentional and having agency. And I hope I'm not skipping to one of the other things you were going to say, but when you went into the coffee shop, for instance, on Sunday afternoon, and you're dedicated 2 hours of time, what types of things did you do? So when you're like, I
Yeah.
just had to spend the time working through it, what types of things helped you?
Yeah. So I was in a space where I really didn't know or believe in or understand what my sort of unique strengths were. Like, I feel like everyone has some special sauce, and I never felt like I had that. So I was searching for frameworks in the early days. Like, I was searching for frameworks of like, how can I figure this out? Like, what is purpose, number one, but then how do I figure out not only what I care about, but what I have to offer? And I started just really thinking about like going to my finance background, thinking about odds and thinking about the concept of advantage. And I ended up just through this process of trying to get like a map of me, like a picture of me and where I could create advantage in my life to do something different, like thinking about it through that lens, I created my own. So I actually have like a little, and I'm happy to share a template with anybody that, that wants it in like a comment on LinkedIn or something. I'm happy to share this with your audience, but like I created just like a map, which I call the advantage map, and started getting feedback in these different areas. So it's 8 different areas of how I think human beings can create an advantage for themselves. And it's not all, what do I know? What's my expertise? It's not that stuff. It's like interest, curiosity, energy, like what gives me energy? What can I sustain? What do I care about? Those types of things. And through that process, I started to really get an idea of where I could play, like what types of next games I could play, and what should I avoid. And so I think about like all of these things as, what are the decision-making filters that I need to use in order to narrow the set of possible things that I could do to ones that have very, very high odds of me liking long-term, me having a unique point of view in, and doing really great work. And so that whole process of just trying to figure out who's Mike, and journaling about it and going, here and there and not finding exactly what I needed. That's what I came out with, was sort of a map framework.
And that I'm guessing that set the stage to be doing the work that end up becoming the purpose. But I love it. The find existing frameworks, and then you'll end up creating the one that is yourself, or you'll find the right one.
Yeah.
But again, you've got to give yourself the space, the priority, and the energy to put towards yourself. Okay, so that was a whole bunch. That was about 17 tips within one tip. So let's go to point 2.
Okay. Oh, for of me. Okay, of my point. Sorry, I got off track. So
no, that's because I totally took us off track. So
no worries. So two, from a I don't know about from a tactical standpoint. I get really like high level, but it's so map of view, creating space, and then it's really like going into the future. So I think about this as thinking about your future self. Pick a time period. Maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 10 years. Me, it's like 80, where it's like, how do I know I've done it well, right? And what are the things that if I was at that age, what would I actually care about? And it was like going through an exercise like that. It was like taking your shot. Did you take your shot, or did you play it small? That matters to me. It doesn't matter to everybody, but it matters to me. And I could say, like, I could convince myself I have to live with the results of whatever happens, right? But this idea of having a compelling future vision of yourself and the life you can create is really powerful, because we systematically have no imagination for that.
Yep.
Our brains are wired for, take the data from the past, project to the future. And that's always a much smaller version of yourself than if you really, really think about it, if you really, really feel it. So I would do things like just create, like, what do I want in life? What is the end goal that I want? And I came up with this idea of, I want to be home. My wife works. I want to be the dad that gets to do his creative stuff and gets to work, but he also gets to, grab the kids from school. He's the first call. I've got flexibility in my schedule. I've got, but I'm getting my creative outlet out there. And then I worked backwards from that. I started taking actions like, what would this guy 10 years from now, or whatever time period, what actions did he take to get there?
Yep.
And you start working backwards from that, and you start taking more bold actions, because your life is now framed from a different point of view. It's not about, I got to do whatever I need to do to keep my job, right? So I'm not fired and ostracized by people or lose my income tomorrow. It's about like bolder sort of 10x type decisions and how you get to that life.
It goes into a little bit of the why. And the why or the
Yeah.
purpose was the word that we used earlier. But, I have found that to be very true that if you know why you're doing something, you will do whatever it takes to achieve it
Yeah.
versus if it's just the motions. And you hit the nail on the head with like visioning is a very powerful too. They teach it to us in coaching school because there is kind of one of those. But it can be really powerful. And you're right, we tend to minimize it and minimize ourselves, even in the vision. Like, oh, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Hate that question anyway. Versus in 80 years, like what legacy do you want to have? What regrets do you want to make sure you avoid? And some of these are big, meaty questions to ask yourself, but they can open up vulnerabilities that help you become really honest with what you want in life now. Who do you need to be now to achieve that goal later or to achieve that vision, in 20, 30, 40 years? Love it.
And what I would just say to people who are like, oh, this is way too deep. Like I'm checking out. I can't do this. It's woo woo or whatever. I think about it as like very logical decision making gates. Like, I mean, just think about how do you know if you made a good choice? Well, project into the future at that point in time. Look at your life today. Like I know that if I'm 65, my 65-year-old self is just going to want to like go hug my kids one last time or whatever, right? Like, so it's a way to make sure in the present that you are focused on the right things. Because if you don't have that, then your decision-making filter becomes, again, how do I keep my job? Or where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, I see myself as a VP and I've worked up the ladder, and that might not be aligned with what you really, really want. And we
And a lot
lag
of
it.
times those can be fear responses. Instead of
Absolutely.
it being a proactive plan, take control of your life, it's a fear reactive response of like, oh, well, I got to do this or I'm going to get fired, or I got to do this or my wife's going to be mad. Instead of
Exactly.
taking the agency and turning the whole story around. And I
Yeah,
love that
precisely.
woo woo is such a good word. I use it all the time, but this isn't. Yes, creating time and space for yourself might feel like, oh, focus on myself, but there's a very practical series of decision making points that are going to come from just giving yourself that space and focusing on yourself.
Yeah, just two quick more points on that. Number one, this isn't self-care. Like you're going to be exhausted by doing this stuff. But this is not like, oh, just take a day off and get a massage or whatever. Like this is serious like thinking time. And two is that on the visioning stuff, like the science is pretty damn clear. And
Yeah.
look at high performers in almost any category, especially in sports.
Sports.
The highest paid, yeah, I mean, the highest paid athletes in the world are employing these strategies and really thinking about how they execute at a very high level. And they're doing it daily, if not, intraday. It's pretty wild.
Learn from the masters,
Yeah.
everybody. Do what they do. Okay, so far we've talked about creating the space, and within that space, envisioning kind of the legacy
Yeah.
or the long-term picture that you want. What's a third practical piece of advice or step we take?
Yeah. So then then it comes to the point where it's like, oh, okay, I have this, but how am I going to get there? And I think the mistake most people make is they start to basically get tunnel vision and get focused on the how. And so what I advise people to do here is to take their focus wider. All right, you have a compelling vision of where you want to go. I force people to create 3 opportunity areas. Okay, I start to talk about portfolio theory from finance and stuff, but it's like, don't just say, oh, okay, I can get this job in this industry, or yes, okay, I can create a business, but that seems really risky to me. Like, get yourself 3 opportunity areas of like, use the question, how might I create the vision that you want, right? And think about it in 3 different formats to force yourself to go wider. And then within each of those, I force people to give 3 options within each opportunity area of how you might take steps towards that vision. Okay. So again, the option area might be get a different job. Option area 2 might be create a freelance, business and go part-time. Option 4 might be like, I quit tomorrow and, build this software business that I've been really thinking about for 6 months and done nothing on, right? Like maybe it's that. Three options of how that could possibly go. And that's your options portfolio. Okay. So the next question then is, how do I gain signal on a path? What is the next step in front of me that will get me information that I should continue investigating or stop and go in a different direction? We get spun up. We start thinking about decisions 10 steps away, or we convince ourselves why we can't do something. It is about this comes from entrepreneurship. It is about the next decision that gets you the signal or information that you need to keep going in the same direction, or you need to pivot. And that's where we focus all of our energy then. And when you do that, you're like a hunting dog with his nose down, sniffing all around and just following that scent. And eventually you get to where you need to go.
All right. So here comes a loaded question. How do you know when you're on the scent?
It's a great question. And my answer is, the only way that you know is by comparison. That's why we have an options portfolio. So if you have,
three, by the way, I'm a fan of threes.
Say that again. The threes.
Love the threes. I'm a huge fan of threes. Our brains work in threes.
Yeah. So it's like overwhelming, or it's not overwhelming, but it's not 2, and it's definitely not 1. But the idea here is, look, life is uncertain. Everything that you do is uncertain. It's very hard to know that you're on the right track. But if you have a North Star, which is you've really defined this, sort of purpose, or at least the direction and this future vision of yourself, you can ask yourself, like, are these things aligned? How do I feel? It's not just a brain thing. Like, do I feel like I am going in the right direction? Using your brain, number one, it's only half of the information or less. And number 2 is it just lies to you. It just talks to you about why you shouldn't do something, because its map of reality is past experience. So I actually talk about the essence of being stuck. The feeling of being stuck is when your soul has already left what you're doing. Like, your soul is telling you that this isn't right. Yep. But we're not listening to it. We're listening to the brain, and the brain can't imagine how you could possibly do something else. It can't show you the steps.
The brain's a little binary. I was wondering if you were going to bring the gut into this, because I'm sitting here thinking, like, I wanted to just put the exclamation point on of, like, how do you know you're on the signal or you're on the scent? Listen to your gut, because we're terrible at it. And the brain gets a little bit stuck in binary mode because it's running. It's like ChatGPT. It can only run on historical information. Your gut, and there's new scientific research out about those connections between, like, the gut and the brain and decision making. And that's where, like, intuition can come in. And instead of just looking at what are the numbers or what's the data tell me, like, what is my intuition? What do I feel about this? That could really tell you you're on the scent.
Feeling can be logical. I'm sorry. It just can be. Like, if you think that, let's say you have an opportunity to take some new course of action and you don't do it because your brain tells you 5 reasons why you'll fail. But because you love that and you could persevere through that, and you don't take that information into account, that's insanity. That's illogical, because you actually had a signal that moves the needle for in terms of increasing odds for you to succeed along that path, and you're saying no because you're using the binary brain. Yeah. So this is where I really try to, with people, I really try. I was raised as a very logical thinker. My dad's a lawyer. I would have to, like, create arguments and, all this stuff. And that's awesome. It's fantastic. It's great. But I feel like I'm trying to always bridge. I think decision-making is right. Like, bridging the head and the heart, and really understanding how the heart affects odds. People, I think, assume that if you're doing something based on feeling, that's lower odds than crunching the numbers. And that's just not true.
That's not true at all. And I think as we kind of like bring this all to a summary, that is a great way to wrap up everything that we've talked about, because really what you're talking about is bringing your whole self to a decision-making process that is about how to activate your whole self in your life and your work. And that's, I think, what we a lot of times fail to do and to lean into, and why we end up feeling stuck, or why we fall into corporate dependence, or why we choose not to exercise the agency that we have in creating kind of more of a self-directed path. And it really has to do with the fact that, even technology isn't binary anymore, let alone human beings. And there's more space for that now.
Yeah, exactly. Love it.
How's that for the mic drop to end the show?
Boom. Drop it.
There, throw the pen. All right, so let's summarize these 3 points, because this is really a little bit of the beginning of the roadmap, right? So you've got to create the time, the space, and give yourself the energy and priority to sit down and really go through the thinking process, not the decision-making process, of what you want to prioritize in life. And then as part of that, envision the future. What kind of legacy do you want to have? Who is your future self, and who do you need to be now in order to become that person? And then you roll out that portfolio of options, start doing your due diligence, and the bloodhound on the will find the scent, especially if you allow the bloodhound to tap into your kind of like inner wisdom. So, Mike, what do you think? Parting words as we wrap things up?
I think we've said a lot. We've covered a lot. This is obviously, it's a simple framework, but it is massively difficult. So I get that. And I think you owe it to yourself to at least investigate how you can take back more agency, and how you can be more of the author of your future, and get what you want. And that is in no way selfish. I think it's actually far more beneficial for society as a whole, plus your family, if you're able to do these things. Now, again, it's not easy. You choose a different hard, but it's worth it. And I think if we all made more decisions based on how we want to be and who we want to be, I think we'd be in a lot better place, like overall. So that's my parting thoughts, I guess.
Oh, and I can't help but bite on the choose your hard, which I think is such a great thing to think about here. There was a CrossFit campaign recently where it essentially drilled into that idea. And the slogan that they used was easy choices, hard life, hard choices, easy life. And if you think about it, this is hard work. The risk in it is you investing in yourself in a way. However, everything will be easier after you do the hard work.
Yep.
There it is, everybody.
Yep.
If there wasn't enough proof out there that you can have a thriving career and an amazing life, Mike, not only proof in the pudding, but also has great advice on how you can start taking steps towards that. And it doesn't mean you have to leave your job and start a business. It means being thoughtful and intentional about the way you show up in the world and the purpose that you bring to it. Love it.
Exactly.
This has been a fantastic episode of No More Mondays Live. I hope all of you on LinkedIn enjoyed it. All of you out there listening to the recording enjoyed it. Don't forget, we are live every Monday morning on LinkedIn. So if you want fresh off the presses advice, information, and conversations, hit us up or visit us at the podcast feed that you like to get your podcasts. So there are countless ways to consume No More Mondays and all the great wisdom people like Mike and I have to offer. Mike, thank you so much for being here today and giving us your thoughts and encouragement to break. Is definitely part of what we want you to take away.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate and am honored that you asked me. So This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we will. You'll definitely hear more from Mike and I, because you can't be on the Satan soapbox this much and not do more stuff together. And to all Definitely. Of you out there, thank you so much. If you are live on LinkedIn, be sure to follow Mike and I. If you are listening on the podcast, hit us up at nomoremondays.info for links and show notes from today's show. Thanks again for joining me. I will see you all next Monday for another episode of No More Mondays Live.